The German Shepherd collapsed at the emergency entrance, front paws splayed on the concrete, blood pooling beneath raw pads. His tongue lolled from parched jaws, each labored breath sending tremors through his mud-spattered coat. Yet his amber eyes remained fixed on the ambulance doors where paramedics rushed a stretcher inside. Witnesses stood frozen, phones capturing the moment this exhausted animal had appeared from nowhere, trailing the ambulance through miles of scorching asphalt and traffic. Inside, the medical team worked frantically on the unconscious patient, unaware of the drama unfolding outside. A security guard approached, baton extended cautiously. "Someone get animal control," he called, reaching for his radio. The dog growled, summoning his last reserves of strength to drag himself toward the hospital doors, leaving a trail of blood and desperation. His determined whimper carried a message no one yet understood. The most important person in his world had just disappeared behind those doors. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The relentless Arizona sun beat down on Riverdale's cracked sidewalks, pushing the September temperature to a blistering 105 degrees. In Westfield Park, beneath the sparse shade of a sycamore tree, 68-year-old Frank Holloway performed his daily ritual. His weathered hands steady despite the years carefully divided a sandwich, placing half on a paper plate for Duke, the German Shepherd, watching with patient devotion. "Eat up, buddy," Frank murmured, his voice carrying the gravelly texture of age and too many cigarettes from decades past. "Gotta keep our strength up." His faded Vietnam veteran cap sat atop silver hair that hadn't seen a proper barber in months, and his sunburned face bore the deep lines of a man who'd seen more than his share of hardship. 2 years ago, Frank had owned a modest home on the east side of town. That was before the heart attack, before the medical bills destroyed his savings, before the bank took the house. Now home was wherever he and Duke could find shelter, sometimes the veterans' shelter when they allowed dogs, most times a hidden spot near the creek where police rarely patrolled. Duke wasn't just any dog. The 7-year-old German Shepherd had served 3 tours as a military K-9 in Afghanistan before a shrapnel injury ended his career. Frank had found him at the county shelter, scheduled for euthanasia due to aggressive tendencies, really just the hypervigilance of a dog trained for war, now confused by civilian life. Frank recognized the same haunted look he'd seen in his own mirror after Vietnam. He'd scraped together his last bit of savings to adopt Duke just 2 days before his scheduled euthanasia. Across town at Riverdale Memorial Hospital, Dr. Sarah Mitchell finished her notes on a cardiac patient. At 36, she was the youngest attending physician in the emergency department, with a reputation for exceptional care of stroke victims, a passion born from losing her father to a massive stroke 5 years earlier. Today marked the 3rd consecutive 12-hour shift during this punishing heat wave, which had already filled their beds with heat exhaustion and cardiac cases. Meanwhile, Dave Connor inspected his ambulance at the start of his shift, methodically checking supplies with the precision of a man who'd spent 20 years in emergency services. The small scar on his right forearm, 3 parallel lines, was his daily reminder of the Rottweiler attack he'd suffered as a child, fueling a wariness of dogs that bordered on phobia. None of them knew their lives were about to converge in an extraordinary testament to loyalty and survival. Frank wiped sweat from his brow as the midday sun climbed higher, beating down on his shoulders through the inadequate shade. His morning routine with Duke had started earlier than usual, hoping to avoid the worst of the heat, but the temperature had risen faster than the weather service predicted. The park was nearly deserted. Only the homeless and desperate ventured out in this punishing weather. "Water break, Duke," Frank said, pouring some of his precious bottled water into a collapsible bowl. Duke lapped eagerly, his thick coat unsuited for the Arizona summer. Frank had tried trimming it with his pocket knife, but Duke's patience only extended so far. Frank's left arm tingled slightly as he recapped the water bottle, a sensation he attributed to sleeping awkwardly on the hard ground last night. He flexed his fingers, dismissing the numbness as nothing serious. At his age, new aches and pains were as regular as sunrise. "Got us a feast today," Frank announced, unwrapping the sandwich he'd received from the Methodist Church's outreach program. Egg salad not his favorite, but protein was protein. He divided it carefully, giving Duke the slightly larger portion. Protein builds muscle. That's what the Army taught us. Of course, they never mentioned how it tastes like sawdust half the time. Duke's ears perked up at Frank's voice, his tail sweeping a small arc in the dust. The bond between them had formed quickly after Frank rescued him from the shelter, two veterans cast aside by a society that celebrated their service in words but not actions. The park bench creaked as Frank shifted his weight. A strange wave of dizziness passed over him, and he gripped the weathered wood to steady himself. The tingling in his arm was spreading to his face now. He tried to call Duke's name, but the word came out slurred and unfamiliar. Frank's vision blurred at the edges. Something was very wrong. His sandwich dropped to the ground as his grip failed. A sharp pain shot through his chest and radiated into his jaw. Duke's head snapped up. Sandwich forgotten. He whined, sensing the change in his master. Frank tried to reach for his companion but found his coordination failing. His breathing became labored, each inhale a conscious effort. "Help," Frank whispered, though no one was near enough to hear. His body tilted sideways, and he slumped onto the bench. Duke barked sharply, moving to Frank's side, nudging his hand with a cold nose. When Frank didn't respond, the dog's whine escalated to urgent barking. He pawed at Frank's leg, trying to rouse him from whatever invisible threat had taken hold. Frank's eyes fluttered. Through the fog descending over his consciousness, he heard Duke's desperate barks. "Good boy," he managed. Before darkness claimed him, Duke stood over Frank's motionless form, alternating between barking and licking his face. When these actions yielded no response, instinct took over. The training that had made him an exceptional military dog surfaced through layers of civilian life. Duke recognized a human in distress, his human, and new action was required. He raced to the park's edge, barking frantically at passing cars. Most drivers swerved slightly and continued on, annoyed by what they perceived as an aggressive stray. Duke returned to Frank, checked on him, then ran back to the street, determined to get attention. Martha and Gerald Wilkins, both in their 70s, were driving slowly past the park on their way to the pharmacy when they noticed the German Shepherd. "That dog's really upset about something," Martha observed, lowering her window despite Gerald's protest. "Don't encourage strays, Martha. Could be rabid for all we know." But Martha had already spotted Frank's collapsed form on the bench. "Gerald, there's someone down, call 911. Gerald fumbled with his phone while Martha cautiously approached, Duke now alternating between barking at her and running back to Frank, clearly trying to lead her. "Sir, can you hear me?" Martha called, keeping a safe distance while Gerald spoke with emergency services. Duke stood protectively beside Frank but allowed Martha to approach, Seeming to understand she was trying to help, Gerald joined them, relaying the dispatcher's questions about Frank's condition. "He's breathing, but he's unresponsive," Gerald reported. "The lady thinks it might be a stroke or heart attack." "They're sending an ambulance," Martha told Duke, as if the dog could understand. "Help is coming." 7 minutes later, ambulance sirens cut through the park's stillness. Dave Connor and his partner Tony Rodriguez pulled up to the curb, equipment already in hand. "Whoa, nobody mentioned a dog," Dave said, stopping short when Duke came bounding toward them, barking urgently. "Is it his dog?" Tony asked the elderly couple. "Seems like it," Martha confirmed. "Dog's been trying to get help." Dave hesitated, his old fear surfacing. "Can someone hold it back while we work?" Gerald attempted to grasp Duke's collar, but the dog sidestepped him, returning to Frank's side, his posture alert but not aggressive. "I think he's a service dog," Martha suggested, noting Duke's disciplined behavior. "Maybe military." Tony approached Frank, medical bag in hand, speaking calmly. "Sir, can you hear me? We're here to help." He checked vital signs while Dave hung back, monitoring the dog warily. BP's dropping, pulse irregular, left-sided facial droop, Tony reported. "Classic stroke presentation. We need to move fast, he's in the golden hour." They worked efficiently, placing Frank on a backboard, attaching an oxygen mask, and starting an IV. Throughout the process, Duke watched intently, occasionally whining but never interfering. "What about the dog?" Martha asked as they prepared to load Frank into the ambulance. "County Animal Control," Dave said firmly. "We can't take animals in the rig. It's against protocol." "But they'll put him in the pound," Martha protested. "Look how concerned he is." Dave's expression hardened. "Ma'am, this man needs immediate medical attention. That's our priority." As they lifted the stretcher, Duke became more agitated, barking and circling the medical team. "Someone grab that dog before he attacks," Dave called, his childhood trauma coloring his perception. Gerald attempted to hold Duke by the collar, but the shepherd pulled away, determined to stay with Frank. "Just go," Martha urged. "I'll call animal control myself after you leave." They loaded Frank into the ambulance, Duke barking frantically as the doors closed. Dave climbed into the driver's seat, relief washing over him as the barrier between him and the dog secured. "Ready to roll," Tony confirmed from the back where he was stabilizing Frank. Dave activated the sirens and pulled away from the curb, glancing in the side mirror. The German Shepherd was racing after them, a streak of black and tan against the pavement. "Damn dog's following us," Dave muttered, accelerating slightly. In the back, Tony worked to stabilize Frank, whose condition was deteriorating. "Step on it, Dave." His right side's completely paralyzed now. Dave increased their speed, assuming the dog would give up the chase, but at each intersection, when he checked his mirrors, the determined animal was still there, tongue lolling, eyes fixed on the ambulance. "This is ridiculous," Dave said after several blocks. "I'm going to stop and chase it off." "No time," Tony called back. "Patients prioritized for the stroke center. We have a maximum 20-minute window for optimal treatment." Torn between protocol and urgency, Dave pressed on, watching with growing disbelief as Duke continued the pursuit, navigating traffic and obstacles with single-minded determination. "Never seen anything like it," Dave murmured, a reluctant respect beginning to form despite his fear. Behind them, Duke pushed onward, his loyalty outweighing exhaustion, his love for Frank driving him beyond normal endurance. The race to Riverdale Memorial had begun. Duke's powerful strides ate up the pavement as he pursued the ambulance, his military training evident in his focused determination. The first mile passed in a blur of effort, his eyes never leaving the flashing lights ahead, his ears, normally alert to every sound, filtered out all distractions except the wailing siren guiding him forward. Every instinct in his body was locked onto a single mission: stay with Frank. Dave checked his side mirror again, disbelief growing as he spotted the German shepherd still maintaining pursuit. "This is crazy," he muttered to Tony. "That dog's still back there. 3 miles now and he's not giving up." "You're kidding me," Tony replied, momentarily glancing away from Frank's monitors. "That's some determined animal." Dave's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I need to stop and deal with this. He's going to cause an accident." "Patient first," Tony reminded him sharply. "BP's still dropping. We're looking at a major cerebral event here." Reluctantly, Dave focused on navigating through the midday traffic, the ambulance's siren parting cars like a hot knife through butter. But at the first red light, where they had to slow slightly, he made his decision. 30 seconds, Dave announced, pulling the ambulance to the curb. "I'm going to scare this dog off before he gets hit or causes a pileup." Dave jumped out, slamming the door behind him. The pavement radiated heat through his boots as he confronted the approaching dog. Duke had slowed to a trot, sides heaving, tongue hanging from his mouth as he desperately tried to cool his overheated body. "Go on! Get out of here!" Dave shouted, clapping his hands aggressively and stamping his foot. "Go home!" Duke stopped, maintaining distance but refusing to retreat, his amber eyes locked with Dave's, communicating a resolve that transcended species. When Dave took a threatening step forward, Duke simply circled wide around him and continued toward the ambulance. "Damn it!" Dave swore, turning back to the vehicle. "Tony, we've got to move. Can't waste any more time." As they pulled away, Dave watched Duke resume his pursuit, somehow finding renewed energy. 14 minutes to the hospital, he announced, trying to focus on the job rather than the dog's unexpected devotion. The route to Riverdale Memorial took them through the heart of downtown, where the midday heat had driven most pedestrians indoors. Those few still on the street stopped to stare at the unusual spectacle of a German shepherd racing after an ambulance, many pulling out phones to record the scene. Melissa Carpenter, on her lunch break from the courthouse, was one such bystander. She watched Duke struggle past, noting his labored breathing and determined gait. Without hesitation, she uncapped her water bottle and poured some into her cupped hand, stepping into Duke's path. "Here, boy," she called softly. "Quick drink." Duke paused just long enough to lap desperately at the offered water before continuing his chase. The momentary hydration giving him a second wind, Melissa watched him go, then pulled out her phone and opened her social media app. "German Shepherd chasing ambulance down 5th Street, she typed. "Anyone know this dog? @Riverdale Hero." Inside the ambulance, Tony worked frantically to stabilize Frank. "Patient's name is Frank Holloway," he reported, having found a VA ID card in the man's wallet. 68 years old, Vietnam vet, according to his ID. "No emergency contacts?" Dave asked. "None listed. No other identification or next of kin information." Dave processed this as he navigated a difficult turn. Another veteran alone in the world. He'd seen too many cases like this over his years of service. His own father, a Vietnam veteran, had struggled for decades before finally finding proper support. Duke's pursuit continued relentlessly. 6 miles in, the pads of his paws began to tear on the rough asphalt. Each step now left a small smear of blood, but the pain registered only as a distant signal compared to the overwhelming need to stay with Frank. The shepherd's military training had conditioned him to push through physical discomfort for the mission. And right now, the mission was clear. At mile 7, Duke encountered his biggest obstacle. The ambulance's route crossed Riverside Bridge, a narrow 2-lane structure with no pedestrian walkway. The shepherd hesitated for only a moment before plunging into the sluggish brown water of the river below, swimming powerfully across the current before scrambling up the opposite bank, mud-caked but undeterred. A pickup truck slowed beside the soaking dog, the driver, a burly construction worker named Mike, leaning out his window. "Need a lift. Buddy, following that ambulance." He patted the truck bed invitingly. Duke regarded the truck warily, his military training making him cautious of strangers. But when Mike pointed toward the now distant ambulance and said, "Let's catch 'em," Duke made a split-second decision and leaped into the truck bed. Mike accelerated, closing the distance to the ambulance. "Got myself a hitchhiker," he announced to his co-worker in the passenger seat. "Dog's been chasing that ambulance for miles. Figure he deserves a break." When they pulled alongside the ambulance at a stoplight, Mike honked and pointed to his truck bed. Dave glanced over, eyes widening at the sight of the mud-covered German shepherd standing resolutely in the pickup. "You have got to be kidding me," Dave muttered, a mix of frustration and unwilling admiration in his voice. The light changed, and both vehicles moved forward. At the turn for the hospital, Mike slowed his truck, and Duke, seeming to understand this was his stop, leaped from the vehicle and resumed his pursuit on foot. "Godspeed, doggo," Mike called after him, raising a respectful fist in the air before driving off. Duke's reprieve in the truck had given him a critical rest, but the final stretch to the hospital was still punishing. The industrial district's concrete expanses offered no shade, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. His black fur absorbed heat like a solar panel, raising his core temperature dangerously high. Dave made one final attempt to deter the dog as they approached the hospital. Pulling over approximately half a mile from their destination, he grabbed a fire extinguisher from the ambulance's equipment bay. "What are you doing?" Tony called from the back. "Scaring this dog off for good," Dave replied, his patience exhausted. "This is getting dangerous." As Duke approached, Dave discharged a burst from the CO2 extinguisher near the dog, creating a loud hiss and a cloud of white vapor. Most animals would have fled from such a frightening display, but Duke merely sidestepped the cloud, his gaze never wavering from the ambulance. The message in those intelligent eyes was clear. Nothing would stop him from completing his mission. Dave stared in disbelief, then slowly returned the extinguisher to its mount. "Your funeral, dog," he muttered, climbing back behind the wheel, in the ambulance's rear compartment. Frank stirred momentarily, his eyes fluttering open. "Duke," he whispered, the name emerging clearly despite his slurred speech. "Sir, you're in an ambulance," Tony explained, adjusting the oxygen flow. We're taking you to Riverdale Memorial. You've had a stroke. My dog, Frank managed, his right hand weakly grasping at Tony's sleeve. Please, my dog. Don't worry about your dog right now, Tony soothed, checking Frank's pupils. Focus on staying calm. He's all I have, Frank whispered before slipping back into unconsciousness. Tony made a note on his tablet. Patient concerned about dog named Duke, possible service animal, as they pulled into the emergency bay at Riverdale Memorial. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was already waiting with her stroke response team. The ambulance doors flew open, and Tony began his rapid report. Frank Holloway, 68-year-old male, found unconscious at Westfield Park. Classic stroke presentation with left side facial droop, right side paralysis, BP 180/110, irregular heartbeat, lost consciousness at scene, briefly regained it during transport. Dr. Mitchell nodded crisply, already examining Frank's pupils as her team transferred him to a hospital gurney. Get him to CT stat. I want TPA ready if he's a candidate. When did symptoms start? Unknown, Tony replied. Bystanders called it in around 11:40. So we're potentially still in the treatment window, she calculated. Let's move. People. As the medical team rushed Frank through the automatic doors, no one noticed Duke limping into the ambulance bay. The German Shepherd's once proud gait had deteriorated to a painful hobble, his bloody paws leaving crimson prints on the concrete. His coat was caked with mud from the river crossing, and his tongue hung limply from his mouth, no longer able to effectively cool his overheated body. Duke paused at the entrance, watching Frank disappear inside. The hospital's antiseptic smell assaulted his sensitive nose, along with the overwhelming sense of medicines, illness, and stress. Everything in the dog's training told him this was not a place to enter, but everything in his heart told him Frank was inside. Security guard Roy Wilkins spotted the bedraggled animal approaching the automatic doors. "Whoa there," he called, moving to intercept. "No dogs allowed. Buddy." Duke tried to sidestep him, but his exhausted body betrayed him. His legs buckled, and he collapsed onto the concrete, a small whimper escaping his throat as he struggled to rise again, eyes still fixed on the doors where Frank had disappeared. Roy's stern expression softened as he noticed the dog's condition. "Jesus," he muttered, kneeling beside the fallen animal. "You're in rough shape, aren't you?" Behind them, Dave was completing his ambulance checklist when he spotted the scene. Despite his earlier frustration, something twisted in his chest at the sight of the collapsed shepherd. He approached slowly, maintaining a cautious distance. "That's the dog that followed us all the way from Westfield Park," he told Roy. "Must be 15 kilometers. Never seen anything like it." Roy looked up in disbelief. "Followed you from Westfield. In this heat." Dave nodded, a reluctant respect in his voice. "Wouldn't give up. Tried everything to turn him back." "Guess he really wants to be with whoever you brought in," Roy observed, gently touching Duke's heaving side. "Should I call animal control?" Dave hesitated, remembering Frank's whispered words. "My dog, he's all I have, against all his instincts." He found himself saying, "Give me a minute. Let me check something first." As Dave turned back toward the hospital entrance, Duke made one final, heroic effort. Rising shakily to his feet, he staggered forward. making it through the automatic doors before collapsing again on the cool tile of the hospital lobby, leaving a trail of bloody paw prints and desperate devotion that would soon change everything. The hospital lobby froze in collective shock as Duke collapsed on the gleaming tile floor. Patients waiting in plastic chairs, nurses hurrying between stations, and administrative staff behind counters all turned to stare at the mud-covered, bleeding German shepherd lying just inside the automatic doors. Receptionist Brenda Collins was the first to react, reaching for the phone. "Security to main lobby. Stat, we have a—" She paused, unsure how to classify the situation. "A dog situation." Roy rushed in behind Duke, kneeling beside the exhausted animal. "Easy there, fella. You can't be in here." Despite his authoritative tone, his hands were gentle as they assessed Duke's condition. "That dog followed our ambulance all the way from Westfield Park," Dave explained to the gathering crowd. 15 kilometers in this heat. Never seen anything like it." A young nurse named Emma knelt beside Duke. Professional concern overriding hospital protocol. "He's severely dehydrated," she noted, examining his gums. "Paw pads are completely torn up. He needs veterinary attention immediately." "I'll call animal control," Brenda stated firmly, already dialing. "Wait," Emma protested. "He's clearly following someone brought in by ambulance. Shouldn't we at least figure out who his owner is?" Dave shifted uncomfortably. "Patient's name is Frank Holloway. Stroke victim. They just took him to CT. He did mention a dog named Duke when he briefly regained consciousness." Duke's ears perked slightly at Frank's name, confirming the connection. "See," Emma said. "He recognizes his owner's name. This isn't just some stray." Hospital Administrator Patricia Winters pushed through the growing crowd, her tailored suit and clipboard projecting authority. "What's happening here? Animals are absolutely prohibited except for registered service animals." "Ma'am," Roy began, "this dog followed the ambulance. I don't care if he flew here on a magic carpet," Patricia interrupted. "Hospital regulations are clear. Remove him immediately or call animal control." Emma stood, her 5'4" frame somehow expanding as she faced the administrator. "With all due respect, Ms. Winters, this animal needs immediate medical attention. He's collapsed from heat exhaustion and dehydration after following his owner's ambulance for 15 kilometers. Doesn't that deserve some compassion?" Patricia's lips thinned. "Compassion doesn't override health regulations. Nurse Chen, this is a hospital, not a veterinary clinic." Dave, surprising himself, stepped forward. "The dog's owner is alone. No family that we could find. The dog might be all he has." A murmur of sympathy ran through the onlookers. Riverdale had a significant veteran population, and stories of homeless vets resonated deeply in the community. Patricia glanced at her watch, clearly calculating the public relations implications. "Fine. You have 30 minutes to get this animal stabilized and removed from the premises. After that, I'm calling animal control myself." She turned on her heel and strode away. Emma immediately took charge. "I need water, some clean towels, and maybe some lunch meat from the cafeteria," she instructed a nearby volunteer. To Roy, she added, "Help me move him somewhere quieter." Together, they carefully lifted Duke, who whimpered softly but didn't struggle. They carried him to a small staff break room just off the main lobby, laying him gently on a blanket someone had retrieved from the supply closet. "I'll check on Mr. Holloway's status," Dave offered, feeling oddly invested now. See if they know anything more about him or the dog." While Emma began cleaning Duke's wounds, Dave headed toward the radiology department where Frank would be undergoing his CT scan. En route, he passed the emergency department and spotted Dr. Sarah Mitchell reviewing charts at the nurses' station. "Dr. Mitchell," he called. "Quick question about the stroke patient who just came in, Frank Holloway." Sarah looked up, her fatigue evident beneath her professional demeanor. "They're prepping him for CT now." "What's up?" "His dog followed our ambulance all the way from Westfield Park. Collapsed in the lobby. Wondered if you knew if he's a service animal or something." Sarah's eyes widened. The whole way from Westfield, she did the mental calculation. At least 9 miles. "He's in rough shape," Dave admitted. "Bloody paws, dehydration. Nurse Chen is helping him, but hospital admin wants him gone in 30 minutes. Something shifted in Sarah's expression. "Let me make a call." She reached for the phone, dialing quickly. "Lisa, it's Sarah. Can you come to the ED right away? We have a situation with a homeless veteran's dog." "Yes. It's urgent." Dave raised an eyebrow questioningly. "Lisa Thornton, our social worker who specializes in veteran cases." Sarah explained, "If anyone can navigate this situation, it's her." In the break room, Duke had accepted water from a bowl but refused the offered food, his eyes constantly moving to the door, searching for Frank. Emma cleaned his paws with antiseptic solution, wincing at his occasional whimpers. "You really love your person, don't you?" she murmured, wrapping gauze around his raw pads. "That's some serious loyalty." Roy leaned against the doorframe, keeping watch. "My brother had a military dog in Iraq. Said that Bond is something else entirely. Looks like this one might have been service-trained." Emma nodded, noticing the way Duke remained still despite his pain. "You might be right. Look at his behavior. He's tolerating medical treatment like he's familiar with it." Lisa Thornton arrived 15 minutes later. A tall woman with salt and pepper hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Her ID badge bounced against her simple blouse as she strode purposefully into the break room. "So, this is our determined friend," she said, kneeling slowly to Duke's level. With practiced movements, she examined his neck for a collar or tags, finding nothing. No identification. Nothing. Emma confirmed. But the paramedic said the patient mentioned a dog named Duke. Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "Duke," she said clearly. The dog's head lifted slightly, confirming the name. "Good boy. Duke." She pulled out her phone, quickly typing some notes. "Frank Holloway. Did you say Vietnam-era veteran?" At Emma's nod, she continued typing. "I'll check VA records, see what we can find out. In the meantime, we need to buy this dog some time. Ms. Winters gave us 30 minutes, Roy reminded her. "We've used about 20. Lisa's smile was confident. "Hospital policy allows service animals to remain with their owners. If we can establish that Duke here has service training, we might have a case." "But without documentation," Emma began. "There are tests," Lisa explained. "Behavioral assessments that can indicate service training." She turned to Duke, her posture straightening. "Duke, attention." Duke's response was immediate, despite his exhaustion. His eyes fixed on Lisa, his posture changing subtly. "Stay," she commanded firmly, then walked across the room. Duke remained perfectly still despite his obvious desire to move. "Release," she said, and Duke relaxed slightly. "Military commands," Lisa explained to the others. "He's responding perfectly. This dog has formal training." Emma looked impressed. "How did you know those commands?" "My late husband was a K9 handler," Lisa explained. "I picked up a few things." She turned back to Duke. "This buys us time to make our case." Patricia Winters reappeared at the door, clipboard still in hand. "Time's up. Is the animal ready for transport?" Lisa stepped forward. "Ms. Winters, I've assessed this dog and found clear evidence of service animal training. Under ADA regulations and the hospital's own policy section, 12.4 service animals may remain with their handlers during treatment." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "Do you have documentation proving this is a service animal?" "Documentation isn't required by law," Lisa countered smoothly. "And given Mr. Holloway's emergency admission, it would be unreasonable to expect it. The dog's behavior demonstrates his training." "This is highly irregular," Patricia protested. "So is a dog running 15 kilometers through blistering heat to stay with his person," Lisa replied. "Sometimes irregular situations require flexible thinking." As they argued, Dr. Mitchell appeared in the doorway, her face grave. "Frank Holloway's CT results are back. He's suffered a major ischemic stroke affecting the left middle cerebral artery. He's heading into emergency surgery now." Lisa turned to Patricia. "This veteran is fighting for his life. His dog is all he has in the world. Are we really going to separate them at this moment?" Patricia hesitated, administrative pragmatism warring with basic humanity. Finally, she sighed. "Fine. The dog can stay, but contained in this room until we determine next steps. And someone needs to be with him at all times." "I'll arrange a volunteer rotation," Lisa promised. "And I'll contact local veteran support services." "Thank you, Patricia." As Patricia left, muttering about protocol exceptions, Dr. Mitchell approached Duke cautiously. "So, this is the determined fellow who followed the ambulance." Duke watched her warily, still alertly tracking every hospital sound. "Frank's going into surgery," Sarah told Duke, feeling only slightly foolish for addressing the dog directly. "The next few hours are critical." Duke seemed to understand the gravity in her voice, his ears flattening slightly as he laid his head down on his paws. "I'll check back when I can," Sarah promised, meeting Emma's eyes. "Keep him comfortable. If Frank makes it through surgery, having Duke nearby during recovery could make a significant difference." After Sarah left, Lisa settled into a chair beside Duke, opening her laptop. "Let's find out more about you and your person, shall we?" While Lisa searched VA databases, Emma continued tending to Duke's physical needs. The shepherd's paws were now properly bandaged, and he'd accepted more water, though food still didn't interest him. His eyes remained fixed on the door, as if willing Frank to appear. "Look at this," Lisa said suddenly, turning her laptop screen toward Emma. "Frank Holloway, decorated Vietnam veteran, 2 Purple Hearts, Bronze Star with Valor. He was a tunnel rat, one of those soldiers small enough to search the Viet Cong tunnels. That explains his bond with Duke," Emma observed. "They're both warriors." Lisa scrolled further. After Vietnam, he built a successful construction company, Holloway Building Services. Married. One son. Oh. Her voice softened. Son killed in Afghanistan in 2012. Wife died of cancer in 2018. Company went bankrupt in 2020 after medical bills. The classic downward spiral, Roy said quietly from the doorway. Seen it too many times. No indication of a service dog in his records, Lisa continued. But there's a gap in his VA visits from about 8 months ago until now. Maybe that's when he got Duke, Emma suggested. Possibly. Lisa closed her laptop. I'm going to make some calls to the local shelters. See if anyone remembers Frank adopting a German Shepherd. Dave appeared at the doorway, coffee in hand. His shift had technically ended, but he found himself unable to leave. Any news on Frank? In surgery now, Emma replied. What about you? Shouldn't you be off duty? Dave shrugged, glancing at Duke. Figured I'd stick around. Not every day you see something like this. He cautiously entered the room, keeping a respectful distance from Duke. Still can't believe he followed us the whole way? Duke's eyes tracked Dave's movements, recognition evident in his gaze. He remembers you, Lisa observed. Yeah, well, I tried to scare him off about 5 times, Dave admitted. Not my finest hour. You were doing your job, Lisa assured him. Dave knelt slowly, still maintaining distance. You're one stubborn dog. Duke, gotta respect that kind of loyalty. To everyone's surprise, he cautiously extended his hand. Duke sniffed it briefly, then returned to his vigilant watch of the door. I think you've been accepted into the pack, Emma teased. Dave stood quickly, uncomfortable with the moment of connection. I should go check on Tony, see if he needs help with the rig. As Dave left, Lisa's phone rang. Lisa Thornton, she answered, then listened intently. Yes, I understand. Thank you for checking. She ended the call and turned to Emma. That was Riverside Animal Shelter. 8 months ago, Frank Holloway adopted a German Shepherd scheduled for euthanasia. Former military working dog, retired due to injury. So Duke is a veteran too, Emma said softly, stroking Duke's head. The shelter director remembered because it was unusual Frank was obviously homeless, but he spent his last $300 on the adoption fee and basic supplies. They almost didn't approve it, but Frank's military background and the dog's immediate response to him changed their minds. $300 is a fortune when you're living on the streets, Roy commented. The director said Frank told her, sometimes the only one who understands a broken soldier is another broken soldier, Lisa added, her voice thick with emotion. 2 hours passed slowly. Volunteers brought Duke fresh water and offered food, which he continued to refuse. Lisa made calls to veteran support organizations while Emma checked in periodically between her shifts. Dave returned with a hamburger from the cafeteria, which he tentatively offered to Duke. Hospital food's pretty bad, but it's better than nothing, he said, placing the unwrapped burger near Duke's nose. Duke sniffed it, then turned away, his abstinence becoming concerning. He won't eat until he knows Frank is okay. Lisa explained. It's a stress response. I've seen it before in working dogs when their handlers are injured. Dave's respect for the animal deepened. Smart dog. too smart for his own good sometimes, Lisa agreed with a small smile. At the 4-hour mark, Dr. Mitchell returned, surgical cap still on her head, fatigue evident in every line of her body. Everyone in the room tensed, reading the gravity in her expression. "Frank made it through surgery," she began, and a collective breath of relief filled the room. "But he's not out of the woods. The stroke caused significant damage. He's in recovery now, still unconscious." "Prognosis?" Lisa asked quietly. Sarah's professional mask slipped slightly. "If he survives the next 24 hours, he has a chance. But he'll likely have permanent right-side paralysis, possible speech difficulties. His age and general health condition complicate things." Duke had raised his head at Sarah's entrance, his intelligent eyes fixed on her face as if understanding every word. "What happens now?" Emma asked. "We monitor him closely in ICU. If he stabilizes, we begin planning long-term care." Sarah hesitated. "Given his homeless status, that's complicated." "I'm already working on options," Lisa assured her. "Several veteran organizations have resources for situations like this." Sarah nodded gratefully, then surprised everyone by kneeling beside Duke. "Your person is fighting hard," she told him softly. "He's going to need you." Duke whined softly, the first vocalization he'd made since collapsing. Sarah glanced at Lisa. "Is there any way we can bring Duke to see Frank? Even briefly. Sometimes familiar presences can help unconscious patients." "ICU regulations," Emma began, "can be bent in exceptional circumstances." Sarah finished firmly. "I'll speak with Dr. Patel. If we wait until the late evening shift when things are quieter." Lisa nodded. "I'll stay with Duke until then." As Sarah left to continue her rounds, the social worker pulled a brush from her bag and began gently working through Duke's mud-encrusted fur. "Let's get you presentable for your reunion," she murmured. Duke submitted to the grooming, but his eyes never left the door, his vigilance unwavering despite his exhaustion. Somewhere in the hospital, Frank Holloway fought his own battle, unaware that his loyal companion had captured the hearts of everyone around him, creating an impromptu team of advocates determined to keep them together. Outside the hospital, the story was spreading. Melissa Carpenter's social media post about the dog chasing the ambulance had been shared thousands of times. Local news vans were gathering in the parking lot, reporters eager for updates on what people were calling Riverdale's most loyal dog. Patricia Winters returned, this time with the hospital's PR director in tow. Her earlier strictness had softened considerably. "Ms. Thornton, we've been receiving media inquiries about Duke and Mr. Holloway. The hospital would like to issue a statement. Can you advise us on the appropriate approach considering Mr. Holloway's privacy and dignity?" Lisa smiled slightly, recognizing the shift in attitude. "I'd be happy to help craft a statement that respects Frank's privacy while acknowledging Duke's remarkable journey." As they discussed messaging, Emma continued tending to Duke, whose eyelids were finally growing heavy. "Rest now," she encouraged him. "You've earned it. Your mission isn't over. It's just changing. Frank's going to need your strength for the recovery ahead." Duke finally surrendered to exhaustion, his breathing deepening into sleep. But even in rest, his body remained oriented toward the door, toward Frank. The invisible bond between them unbroken by distance or circumstance. The sun began to set outside, casting long shadows through the small break-room window. A hospital that had begun the day following standard protocols had been transformed by one dog's extraordinary devotion, creating ripples of compassion that would continue to spread in unexpected ways. Midnight descended on Riverdale Memorial, bringing the relative quiet that marks hospital night shifts. The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the corridors as Nurse Denise Peterson completed her rounds in the intensive care unit. She paused at Frank Holloway's bed, checking the monitors that tracked his precarious hold on life. His face remained slack on the right side, the stark evidence of the stroke that had nearly claimed him. "Hanging in there, Mr. Holloway," she murmured, adjusting his IV line. "You've got quite the fan club rooting for you." Down the hall, Dr. Sarah Mitchell reviewed Frank's latest lab results, the numbers swimming before her tired eyes. She'd been on duty for nearly 16 hours, but couldn't bring herself to leave while Frank remained in critical condition. Something about this case, the homeless veteran, the devoted dog, had pierced her professional detachment. Lisa Thornton appeared in the doorway of the doctor's lounge, a paper cup of vending machine coffee in each hand. "Thought you might need this," she offered, placing one on the table beside Sarah. "Thanks," Sarah said gratefully, taking a sip of the bitter liquid. "Any update on Duke? Finally ate a little chicken about an hour ago." Lisa reported. "His paws are looking better after treatment, but he's restless, keeps trying to search the hospital. Emma's with him now." Sarah nodded, her gaze returning to Frank's chart. "His intracranial pressure is still elevated, but stable. Next few hours are critical." Lisa settled into a chair across from her. "I've been making calls. Found some interesting information about Frank. Did you know he was awarded the Bronze Star for saving 4 members of his unit during an ambush?" Sarah looked up, surprised. "No, I didn't." "He never talks about it. According to the VA counselor I spoke with, typical of that generation of vets." Lisa sipped her coffee. "He owned a successful construction company for 30 years, lost everything caring for his wife during her cancer treatment. Their insurance capped out, and he used his retirement funds to cover experimental treatments. And then ended up homeless," Sarah concluded. "Too common a story?" Lisa nodded soberly. "His VA counselor lost track of him about 8 months ago. That's when he stopped coming to appointments. Around when he adopted Duke." Sarah noted. "Exactly." Lisa set down her cup. "About that visit with Duke, is it still possible?" Sarah checked her watch. "Now's actually perfect. Shift change just finished. Dr. Patel's in surgery, and the night supervisor is someone I can work with." She hesitated. "But Frank's condition is extremely delicate. Any agitation could be dangerous." "Duke is remarkably disciplined," Lisa assured her. "Military training runs deep." Sarah made her decision. "Let's do it now, while the timing's right. 10 minutes max, and at the first sign of any issue, Duke leaves immediately." They moved quickly through the quiet corridors, returning to the break room where Emma sat beside Duke, who was alert despite the late hour. His bandaged paws were tucked neatly beneath him, and his coat, now cleaned of mud, gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "Duke," Lisa called softly. The shepherd's ears perked immediately. "Want to see Frank?" The dog rose instantly, his focus laser-sharp at the mention of his person's name. Sarah knelt to Duke's level, looking directly into his intelligent eyes. "You need to be very calm and quiet. Frank is very sick. Do you understand? Duke held her gaze steadily, an almost human comprehension in his expression. I'll take that as a yes, Sarah said, standing. Emma, can you stay here in case we need backup? Emma nodded. Of course. Good luck. Lisa attached a makeshift leash to Duke's collar, a length of gauze twisted into a sturdy rope. Ready when you are. They moved through the hospital like a covert operation, taking service elevators and back corridors to avoid attention. Duke walked obediently beside Lisa, his movements careful despite his obvious eagerness. His bandaged paws made soft padding sounds on the linoleum floors. At the ICU entrance, Sarah swiped her access card. Remember, absolute quiet, she reminded them. The ICU was dimly lit, with the steady beeping of monitors creating a technological lullaby. 6 beds were occupied, each containing a patient fighting their own battle against time and biology. Nurse Denise looked up from her station, surprise registering on her face at the sight of Duke. Sarah raised a finger to her lips, then whispered a brief explanation. Denise's expression softened, and she nodded her permission. They approached Frank's bed slowly. The veteran lay still, surrounded by machines monitoring every aspect of his fragile condition. Oxygen flowed through a nasal cannula, and IVs delivered medications and fluids to his system. His face was pale against the white hospital pillow, the right side drooping noticeably. Duke stopped at the bedside, his posture alert but controlled. He sniffed the air, taking in the sterile hospital smells mixed with the familiar scent of his person. A small whine escaped him, quickly suppressed. It's okay, Lisa whispered, stroking his head. Frank's still here. Sarah checked the monitors, relieved to see no change in Frank's vital signs. His brain activity is actually increasing slightly, she noted, watching the EEG readout. That's potentially a good sign. Duke slowly lowered his muzzle to Frank's limp hand, which hung slightly over the edge of the bed. With infinite gentleness, he touched his nose to Frank's fingers, then looked up at Frank's face, ears forward in concentration. I've seen therapy dogs do this, Sarah whispered to Lisa. Sarah, they can sense changes we can't perceive. Lisa nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Military dogs are trained to check on injured handlers. For several minutes, Duke maintained his vigil, occasionally touching his nose to Frank's hand, but otherwise remaining perfectly still. The only movement was his eyes, which tracked every rise and fall of Frank's chest as if counting each precious breath. Then something extraordinary happened. The monitors showed a slight acceleration in Frank's heart rate. His fingers, the ones Duke had been nosing, twitched almost imperceptibly. He's responding, Sarah breathed, watching the brain activity monitor where new patterns were emerging. Duke's presence is registering somewhere in his consciousness. Lisa squeezed Sarah's arm in wordless emotion. Duke noticed the change, too. His ears pricked forward, and he moved slightly closer, his focus intensifying. He made a soft sound, somewhere between a whine and a purr, barely audible even in the quiet room. Frank's eyelids fluttered, though they didn't open. His fingers twitched again, more noticeably this time. Frank, Sarah called softly, moving to the opposite side of the bed. Frank, can you hear me? The monitors began to show more activity, heartbeat strengthening, blood pressure rising slightly. brainwaves shifting toward consciousness patterns. "Duke's reaching him somehow," Lisa whispered in awe. Sarah leaned closer to Frank. "Frank, Duke is here. Your dog found you. He followed the ambulance all the way to the hospital." At Duke's name, Frank's eyelids fluttered more purposefully. His lips moved slightly, though no sound emerged. Duke remained steady, his discipline impeccable despite his obvious excitement at Frank's responses. His tail gave a single hopeful wag, then stilled. "This is incredible," Denise whispered, having approached quietly to observe. "I've never seen anything like it." The moment of connection continued for several precious minutes. Frank never fully regained consciousness, but his body responded to Duke's presence in ways that defied simple medical explanation. The monitors showed activity that suggested his brain was fighting to wake, to reach back toward the loyal companion who had traveled so far to find him. Then, without warning, the delicate balance shifted. A high-pitched alarm sounded from one of the monitors. Frank's blood pressure was dropping precipitously. "BP's crashing," Sarah said, instantly shifting to emergency mode. "Denise, get the crash cart. Lisa, take Duke out now." Lisa tugged gently at Duke's makeshift leash, but the shepherd resisted, his eyes fixed on Frank's suddenly ashen face. "Duke, come," Lisa commanded more firmly, using the military tone that had worked earlier. The dog hesitated, torn between obedience and his desperate need to stay with Frank. "Code Blue, ICU Bed 4, Denise called into the intercom, summoning the emergency response team. Sarah was already lowering Frank's bed flat, preparing for resuscitation procedures. "Lisa, get him out of here," she ordered, her voice sharp with urgency. Lisa wrapped an arm around Duke's chest, physically guiding him away from the bed. "Duke, Frank needs the doctors now. Come." The shepherd finally yielded, allowing Lisa to lead him from the ICU as medical personnel rushed in. His reluctance was palpable, every step away from Frank clearly painful. As the ICU doors closed behind them, a long, mournful howl escaped Duke's throat, a sound of such primal anguish that it stopped everyone within earshot. "I know, boy," Lisa soothed, kneeling beside him in the corridor. "I know." Inside the ICU, Sarah and the code team worked frantically to stabilize Frank. "Push one of Epi," she ordered, watching the monitors. "Starting compressions." Ding. She positioned her hands over Frank's sternum and began the rhythmic compressions that would keep blood flowing to his brain. "Come on, Frank," she muttered between counts. "Don't give up now. Duke needs you." In the corridor, Duke's howl had given way to restless pacing, his bandaged paws moving in tight circles as Lisa tried to comfort him. Emma arrived, having heard the code called over the hospital PA system. "What happened?" she asked breathlessly. "He was responding to Duke, and then his BP suddenly crashed." Lisa explained, her voice tight with concern. "They're working on him now." Duke stopped pacing abruptly, his head lifting as if listening to something only he could hear. A second howl erupted from him, more desperate than the first. "Duke!" "Quiet," Lisa commanded, though her voice broke with emotion. Inside the ICU, the monitors showed no cardiac activity. "Still in a systole," a resident reported. "That's 15 minutes of CPR." Sarah refused to give up, continuing compressions even as sweat beaded on her forehead. "Push another round of Epi, and get an ultrasound. I want to check for cardiac tamponade." A technician quickly applied the ultrasound wand to Frank's chest, the grainy image appearing on a small screen. No fluid around the heart. "Doctor." Sarah studied the image, then shifted the wand slightly. "Wait. There's something?" She adjusted the angle. "Possible clot in the pulmonary artery. We need to administer TPA now." "But his stroke," the resident began. "I know the risks." Sarah cut him off. "But he's dying right now. Give him 50 milliliters TPA IV push, then start the drip." As the medication was administered, Sarah continued compressions, her arms aching with the effort. "Come on, Frank," she whispered. "Duke ran 15 kilometers for you. You can fight a little longer for him." Outside in the corridor, Duke's howling had stopped. He stood absolutely still, head raised, ears forward, as if listening to something beyond human perception. Lisa and Emma exchanged worried glances, recognizing that the dog's behavior had changed dramatically. "Duke," Lisa called softly. The shepherd didn't respond, his entire being focused elsewhere. Then, without warning, he collapsed onto the floor, his body suddenly limp. "Duke!" Emma cried, rushing to the dog's side. She checked his pulse, found it racing. "He's in shock or something. We need help out here, inside the ICU." A miracle was unfolding. The monitor that had shown a flat line suddenly registered a small, erratic blip. Then another. "We've got electrical activity," the resident announced, hope creeping into his voice. Sarah didn't dare stop compressions yet. "Continue the TPA drip. Let's see if we can get a sustainable rhythm." The blips continued, gradually becoming more regular. "BP's coming up," Denise reported. 65 systolic and climbing. Sarah finally stopped compressions, watching the monitor with barely contained hope. The line continued to show cardiac activity, weak but present. "He's back," she breathed, allowing herself a moment of relief before continuing. "Get cardiology down here, Stat, and neurology needs to reassess given the TPA." As the team worked to stabilize Frank's newly restarted heart, none of them were aware of Duke's simultaneous collapse in the hallway, or the strange synchronicity that had occurred between man and dog at the moment when life and death hung in perfect balance. The waiting room outside the ICU had transformed into an impromptu command center by morning. Lisa sat with her laptop open, dark circles under her eyes testifying to her sleepless night. Emma, technically off-duty, remained curled in an uncomfortable vinyl chair, unwilling to leave. Dave had returned at dawn, bearing coffee and breakfast sandwiches that mostly went untouched. In the corner, a local veterinarian named Dr. Melissa Carlin knelt beside Duke, who lay on a makeshift bed of hospital blankets. The German shepherd's condition had stabilized after his mysterious collapse, but he remained unusually subdued, his eyes half closed, his breathing shallow. "His vitals are stable, but something's definitely off," Dr. Carlin reported, packing away her stethoscope. "The paw injuries are healing nicely, and the dehydration is resolving with the IV fluids. But this lethargy concerns me." "Could it be emotional?" Lisa asked. "The stress of separation, maybe." Dr. Carlin shrugged. "Dogs can certainly experience stress and depression, but this seems more profound." She stroked Duke's head gently. It's almost like he's experiencing sympathetic symptoms with his owner. Any recommendations? Lisa pressed. Keep him comfortable. Continue the fluids and antibiotics for his paws. But honestly, the vet hesitated. I think his recovery is linked to his owner's condition. How is Mr. Holloway doing? All eyes turned to the ICU doors, which remained firmly closed after the previous night's emergency. No one had been allowed in since Frank's cardiac arrest, though Sarah had sent brief updates when possible. Still critical, Lisa answered. They managed to restart his heart, but the TPA they used to dissolve the clot creates risks for someone who's already had a stroke. They're monitoring him closely. Dave shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Never seen anything like what happened last night. The way Duke knew something was wrong before the monitors even went off. He shook his head. Then collapses at almost the exact moment Holloway's heart stops. That's beyond coincidence. Emma nodded agreement. I've heard stories about service dogs sensing medical emergencies before they happen. Military working dogs are especially attuned to their handlers. The ICU doors swung open, and Sarah emerged, looking exhausted beyond measure. She'd been on duty for over 24 hours now, her scrubs wrinkled, her hair escaping its ponytail. Everyone tensed, bracing for news. He's stabilized, she reported, accepting the coffee Lisa immediately offered. But his condition remains extremely critical. The TPA successfully dissolved the pulmonary embolism that caused his cardiac arrest, but it also increased bleeding risk in the brain. So, what happens now? Dave asked. Sarah sank into a chair, rubbing her temples. We wait, monitor, hope the medications do their job without causing further damage. She glanced at Duke. How's our four-legged hero doing? Not great, Dr. Carlin admitted. Physically, he's recovering, but his energy and responsiveness are concerning. Sarah frowned, studying Duke with her clinical gaze. Almost like he's mirroring Frank's condition. That's what I was thinking, the vet agreed. Is there any way they could be together? Emma asked. After what happened last night. Too risky. Sarah interrupted gently. Frank is too unstable right now. Any additional stress could tip the balance. Lisa's phone buzzed, and she excused herself to take the call in the hallway. When she returned minutes later, her expression was grave. That was Riverdale Animal Control, she announced. They've received multiple complaints about a dangerous dog in the hospital. They're sending officers to remove Duke. Dangerous? Emma exclaimed. He's been nothing but gentle. Apparently someone on staff filed a formal complaint after Duke's howling episode last night, Lisa explained. Claimed he was aggressive and frightening patients. Dave's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. I was there. He was distressed, not aggressive. Unfortunately, the complaint is enough to trigger mandatory removal under county regulations, Lisa said. They're giving us 1 hour to have him out of the hospital voluntarily, or they'll come in with restraints. Where would he go? Emma asked, her voice rising with distress. Lisa's silence answered the question. The county shelter was overcrowded and underfunded. A dog with Duke's size and potential behavioral issues would likely face euthanasia, especially without an owner present to claim him. This is insane, Dave muttered. The dog saves his owner's life, and this is how we repay him. Sarah stood, determination replacing her fatigue. Let me talk to Patricia. Surely we can work something out, temporary accommodations at a local vet or boarding facility. I've called every facility within 30 miles, Lisa said. They're all booked solid because of the holiday weekend. The closest option is a boarding kennel in Phoenix, but they require proof of vaccinations and owner consent forms. Dr. Carlin hesitated, then offered, I could possibly take him at my clinic, but only for 48 hours, max. We're not set up for long-term boarding. The group fell silent, the weight of the situation settling over them. Duke seemed to sense the tension, his ears flicking toward their conversation despite his lethargy. What about your place, Lisa? Emma suggested. Just temporarily. Lisa shook her head regretfully. My apartment building has strict no-pet policies. I'd lose my lease. Dave surprised everyone by saying, I could take him. All eyes turned to him in disbelief. You're afraid of dogs, Emma reminded him. Dave shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the attention. Yeah. Well, this one's different. He's earned some respect. He glanced at Duke. My backyard's fenced. It could work for a few days. Before anyone could respond, Patricia Winters appeared, accompanied by a hospital security guard and a stern-looking woman in a county uniform. Ms. Thornton, Patricia began formally. This is Officer Jenkins from Animal Control. She's responding to a complaint about an unauthorized animal on the premises. Officer Jenkins stepped forward, clipboard in hand. I have an order for removal of a German Shepherd being illegally harbored in a medical facility. Lisa stood to meet them. Officer Jenkins, this dog is a service animal belonging to a critical patient, under ADA regulations. Without documentation, that claim cannot be verified. Officer Jenkins interrupted. And I have signed statements describing aggressive behavior last night, including howling and resistance to handlers. He was responding to his owner's medical crisis. Dr. Carlin interjected. As a veterinarian, I can attest that his behavior was normal under the circumstances. Officer Jenkins remained unmoved. My orders are to remove the animal to county facilities for evaluation. If the owner recovers, he can reclaim the dog through proper channels. And if the owner doesn't recover, Dave asked bluntly. The officer's silence spoke volumes. This is Frank Holloway's only family, Lisa pleaded. He's a decorated Vietnam veteran who lost everything caring for his dying wife. Are we really going to separate them now? Officer Jenkins softened slightly. I understand this is emotional, but regulations exist for patient safety. The animal must be removed. I'll take him, Dave repeated more firmly. I'm a county employee paramedic with Riverdale Emergency Services. I can sign whatever liability forms you need. Officer Jenkins consulted her clipboard. Temporary custody would require a secure facility, proof of your ability to contain the animal, and your signature accepting full liability for any incidents. Done, Dave said, without hesitation. Patricia looked relieved at this potential solution. The hospital would certainly prefer a voluntary removal to forced extraction. Sarah stepped forward. Before any decision is made, I need to check on my patient. She turned to Patricia. Frank Holloway's condition deteriorated dramatically when Duke was removed last night. There's a medical argument for keeping them in proximity. Dr. Mitchell, Patricia replied with forced patience. While I appreciate your concern, the hospital's legal position is clear. The animal cannot remain without proper documentation. Then at least let me monitor Frank's condition during the transition, Sarah insisted. If we see any negative changes, we need to reconsider immediately. Patricia reluctantly agreed. You have 30 minutes to prepare the animal for transport and monitor your patient. As the administrators stepped away to complete paperwork, the group huddled around Duke. The shepherd had raised his head during the confrontation, seeming to understand that something significant was happening. I don't have any dog supplies at home, Dave admitted. Never thought I'd need them. I'll get you the basics. Dr. Carlin offered. Food, bowls, medications for his paws, and I'll contact every veterans organization in the state, Lisa added. Someone must have resources for this situation. Emma knelt beside Duke, gently stroking his head. It's just temporary, boy. Just until Frank gets better. Duke's eyes, though tired, held a depth of understanding that tightened Emma's throat with emotion. He slowly raised himself to a sitting position, his military discipline evident even in his weakened state. Sarah returned to the ICU to monitor Frank, while Lisa helped Dave complete the temporary custody paperwork. Dr. Carlin left to gather supplies from her clinic, promising to return before the 30-minute deadline. When Sarah emerged from the ICU 15 minutes later, her expression confirmed their fears. Frank's blood pressure is already fluctuating. His brain activity changed the moment I entered the room asking about Duke. He knows. Somehow, he knows we're separating them. We don't have a choice, Lisa said miserably. At least with Dave. Duke will be safe and nearby. Officer Jenkins returned, accompanied by 2 uniformed animal control officers carrying a transport crate. Time to go, she announced. Duke, sensing the finality in her tone, struggled to his feet. His bandaged paws were steadier now, though his movements remained slow and deliberate. He looked toward the ICU doors, a soft whine escaping his throat. Can he say goodbye? Emma asked impulsively. Just at the ICU doors, Frank might sense him there. Officer Jenkins hesitated, then nodded curtly. 30 seconds. No entry into the unit. Lisa carefully guided Duke to the ICU doors, which Sarah held open just enough for the dog to see inside. Duke stood at attention, his gaze fixed on Frank's distant bed, visible through the glass partition surrounding each ICU station. Frank, Duke is here, Sarah called softly. He's going to a safe place until you're better. Though Frank showed no visible response, the monitors beside his bed registered subtle changes, slight increases in heart rate and brain activity that only Sarah noticed. He knows, she whispered to Lisa. Somehow, he knows. After the brief goodbye, Dave cautiously took Duke's makeshift leash. The shepherd followed him without resistance, though his eyes remained fixed on the ICU doors until they passed out of sight. The small procession moved slowly through the hospital corridors, drawing curious stares from staff and visitors who had heard rumors of the remarkable dog who had chased an ambulance across town. Duke walked with quiet dignity beside Dave, his military bearing evident despite his injuries and exhaustion. At Dave's truck in the parking lot, the reality of the separation finally seemed to hit Duke. As the animal control officers approached with the transport crate, Duke planted his feet, his body stiffening in resistance. He needs to be crated for legal transport, Officer Jenkins insisted. Dave looked at Duke's proud posture, then shook his head. No crate. He rides in the cab with me. I'll sign whatever waiver you need. For a long moment, Officer Jenkins stared at Dave. measuring his determination against her protocols. Finally, she sighed. "Your liability insurance better be paid up." She thrust another form at him. "Sign here, acknowledging that you're ignoring official recommendation for secure transport." Dave signed without hesitation, then opened his passenger door. "Come on, Duke. Let's go home." The word home seemed to register with Duke. He looked back once at the hospital, then with military precision, jumped into the truck's cab and sat at attention in the passenger seat. As Dave started the engine, he glanced at his unusual passenger. "Just temporary, buddy. We'll have you back with Frank before you know it." But the worry in his eyes betrayed his words as they drove away from Riverdale Memorial, leaving Frank Holloway alone for the first time since Duke had entered his life. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Dave's modest backyard as he watched Duke pace the perimeter fence. The German shepherd moved methodically, inspecting every inch of his temporary territory with military precision despite his bandaged paws. After completing his third circuit, Duke settled on the back porch, his gaze fixed unwavering in the direction of Riverdale Memorial, though the hospital lay miles beyond his sight. "He's not going to settle, is he?" Dave remarked to Emma, who had come by after her shift with supplies and dinner. "Give him time," she advised, setting down containers of takeout on the kitchen counter. "He's in a strange place with someone he barely knows, worried about Frank." Dave sighed, opening the back door to call Duke inside. The shepherd acknowledged the command but remained stationed on the porch, his posture alert despite his obvious fatigue. "Not hungry again," Dave reported, turning back to Emma. "That's 24 hours with barely any food. Dr. Carlin said to call her if he refuses another meal." Emma studied Duke through the window. "It's like he's still on duty somehow. Like he can't stand down until he knows Frank is safe." Dave's phone rang, Lisa calling with an update from the hospital. He listened intently, his expression growing more troubled with each passing moment. "Frank's condition?" Emma asked when he ended the call. "Deteriorating." Dave answered grimly. They had to increase his medications to keep his blood pressure stable. Sarah says his neurological responses are weaker than they should be at this point, and she thinks it's related to Duke being gone. Dave shrugged helplessly. She can't prove it medically, but the timing is suspicious. Frank was improving while Duke was there, then started declining as soon as they were separated. "What about finding Duke a permanent solution?" Emma asked. "Any luck with the veterans organizations?" Lisa's hit roadblocks everywhere. Most programs have waiting lists. Others won't take an animal without the owner's direct application. Dave ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Damn system is designed to separate them, not keep them together. Outside, Duke had risen again, ears alert at some distant sound only he could hear. He moved to the fence, staring intently toward the street, then released a low whine. "What's he doing?" Emma asked. Before Dave could answer, Duke began to dig frantically at the base of the fence, his bandaged paws tearing at the earth with desperate energy. "Hey!" Dave rushed outside, alarmed by the sudden behavior change. "Duke, stop." The shepherd ignored him completely, continuing to excavate with single-minded determination. Blood began to seep through the bandages as Duke's wounds reopened from the effort. Dave approached cautiously, still wary despite their growing bond. "Duke, no," he commanded firmly. attempting to mimic Lisa's authoritative tone. "Stop digging." Duke paused, only briefly, fixing Dave with a gaze of such human-like determination that the paramedic stepped back involuntarily. Then the dog resumed his excavation, his actions becoming more frantic. "He's going to seriously hurt himself," Emma said, joining Dave in the yard. "We need to stop him." Dave cautiously reached for Duke's collar, but the shepherd sidestepped him with surprising agility. For the next 10 minutes, they tried everything to distract him: treats, toys, commands, but Duke remained focused solely on his escape attempt. "I'm calling Dr. Carlin," Emma decided, pulling out her phone. "He might need sedation before he tears his paws apart completely." While Emma made the call, Dave knelt at a safe distance from Duke. "What is it, boy? What's going on with you?" Duke paused, his gaze lifting toward the street again, head cocked as if listening. Then, with renewed urgency, he returned to his digging, now with enough progress that he was starting to squeeze his shoulder under the fence. "No, you don't," Dave muttered, grabbing a section of chicken wire from his garage and quickly securing it across the growing gap. Duke growled in frustration, the first aggressive sound Dave had heard from him, and moved to a different section of fence. Dr. Carlin arrived 20 minutes later, medical bag in hand. By then, Duke had attempted 3 separate escape routes, reopening all his healing paw wounds and adding new injuries to his already stressed body. "This isn't normal behavior, even for a distressed dog," Dr. Carlin observed, preparing a sedative. "Something's triggered him. Can you give him enough to calm him without knocking him out completely?" Dave asked, holding Duke's collar while the dog continued straining toward the fence. "I don't want to distress him more by having him wake up disoriented." "I'll start with a low dose," she agreed. Approaching Duke carefully, the shepherd was so focused on escape that he barely reacted to the injection, continuing his attempts until the medication gradually took effect. As Duke finally settled, his muscles relaxing while his eyes remained alert, Dave's phone rang again. It was Sarah, her voice tight with urgency. "Frank's crashing," she reported without preamble. "We've had to intubate him. His brain activity is diminishing rapidly, and we can't stabilize his vital signs. Lisa's here. She's trying to get emergency approval to bring Duke in under compassionate care guidelines. But the hospital administration is dragging their feet." Dave looked at Duke, now lying on the grass, fighting the sedative while still staring in the direction of the hospital with unwavering focus. "He knows," Dave said suddenly. "Somehow, Duke knows Frank is worse. That's why he started trying to escape. He's trying to get back to the hospital." "That's not scientifically possible," Dr. Carlin began, but even she sounded uncertain. "I don't care what's scientifically possible," Dave interrupted. "I've seen enough in the past 2 days to know there's something special about this dog's connection with Frank." He made a split-second decision. "We're bringing him in. Now." "Dave, you can't just—" Emma started. "Watch me," Dave replied, already gathering Duke in his arms. The sedated shepherd was heavy, but didn't resist as Dave carried him to his truck. "Dr. Carlin, can you follow us with your medical supplies, Emma? Call Lisa and tell her we're on our way. Tell her to meet us at the service entrance on the east side, fewer people, no security cameras." Within minutes, they were racing toward Riverdale Memorial. Duke lying across the back seat, fighting the sedative's effects through sheer determination. His eyes remained open, fixed on the road ahead as if he understood exactly where they were headed. "Hang on, Frank," Dave murmured, pressing harder on the accelerator. "Your backup is on the way." At the hospital, Lisa paced outside the service entrance, anxiety evident in every line of her body. Her face flooded with relief when Dave's truck pulled up, followed closely by Dr. Carlin's sedan. "Thank God," she breathed as Dave gently lifted Duke from the back seat. "Frank's condition is critical. They're talking about moving him to comfort care only if there's no improvement in the next hour, meaning they're giving up," Dave translated grimly, adjusting his grip on Duke. The shepherd's head rested against his shoulder, eyes half closed from the sedative, but body tense with awareness. "How are we doing this?" Emma asked, scanning the building nervously. "Service elevator to the 3rd floor, then the back stairwell to ICU." Lisa explained. "Sarah's waiting to let us in through the staff entrance." "Patricia's in a board meeting for the next hour, and the head of security owes me a favor. He's redirected the evening patrols away from our route." Dave nodded, impressed with the impromptu covert operation. "Let's move." Their strange procession moved quickly through the hospital's back corridors, encountering only a few staff members who, seeing Lisa's determined expression, chose not to question the unauthorized dog in Dave's arms. Duke remained calm, his military training evident in his composed acceptance of the unusual situation. When they reached the ICU's staff entrance, Sarah was waiting, her face drawn with fatigue and worry. "Hurry," she whispered, holding the door. "His condition is deteriorating by the minute." Inside the ICU, the normal quiet was punctuated by the urgent beeping of Frank's monitors. A privacy screen had been erected around his bed, concealing their approach from the nurse's station. As they rounded the screen, the gravity of Frank's condition became immediately apparent. Frank lay motionless, a breathing tube protruding from his mouth, his skin ashen against the white hospital linens. Multiple IV lines delivered medications, fighting a losing battle to maintain his failing body functions. The monitor showed dangerously low blood pressure and an irregular heartbeat. "We're breaking about 15 hospital regulations right now," Sarah murmured, checking to ensure they remained unobserved. "But I've tried everything medically possible." Dave carefully lowered Duke to the floor beside Frank's bed. The shepherd was still affected by the sedative, but at the sight and scent of his person, a new energy seemed to flow through him. He pulled himself to standing, leaning against the bed for support. "His vitals are already responding," Sarah noted with quiet amazement, watching the monitors. "Blood pressure's coming up slightly, heart rate stabilizing." Duke whined softly, struggling to reach Frank's hand, which hung limply over the edge of the bed. Dr. Carlin stepped forward to assist, gently lifting Duke's front legs onto the mattress so he could make contact. With infinite gentleness, Duke nuzzled Frank's hand, then rested his muzzle against it, his eyes never leaving Frank's face. A soft sound emerged from his throat. Not quite a whine, not quite a purr, but something in between that seemed to vibrate with emotional intensity. "Look at the EEG," Sarah whispered, pointing to a monitor tracking Frank's brain activity. "Those patterns, they're shifting toward consciousness." For several breathless minutes, they watched as Frank's vital signs gradually strengthened. The irregular heartbeat smoothed into a steadier rhythm. His blood pressure rose toward more sustainable levels. Then Frank's fingers, the ones Duke was touching, twitched slightly, Duke immediately responded with another soft sound, pressing his muzzle more firmly against Frank's hand. "Frank," Sarah called softly. "Frank, can you hear me? Duke is here. He came back to you." Frank's eyelids fluttered, though they didn't open. His fingers moved again, this time curling slightly as if trying to grip Duke's fur. "This is remarkable," Dr. Carlin whispered. "I've heard of therapy animals having calming effects, but this is beyond that. It's almost like they're connected somehow," Lisa finished. "Beyond what we can explain." Dave, the most skeptical among them, found himself speechless at the transformation occurring before his eyes. The monitors confirmed what seemed impossible. Frank was responding, rallying against the medical crisis that had nearly claimed him. The moment of quiet wonder was shattered by a commotion at the ICU entrance. Patricia Winter's voice carried clearly through the unit. "I was informed there's an unauthorized animal in ICU. This is absolutely unacceptable." "Damn," Sarah muttered. "Meeting must have ended early." Lisa stepped forward. "I'll handle this. Keep Duke with Frank as long as possible." She moved to intercept Patricia, drawing her into a heated discussion just beyond the privacy screen. "We don't have much time," Sarah warned, checking Frank's latest readings. "But what's happening right now is medically significant. His neurological responses are dramatically improved just from Duke's presence." Duke remained focused entirely on Frank, oblivious to the human drama unfolding around him. His entire being seemed concentrated on the connection between them, the invisible bond that had driven him to chase an ambulance through miles of blistering heat. Patricia's voice grew louder, her patience clearly exhausted. "This ends now. Security is on their way, and that animal is leaving the premises immediately." Lisa's response was too low to hear, but her tone was equally determined. Dave tensed, ready to defend their position, but Dr. Carlin placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Look," she whispered, pointing to Frank. Frank's eyes had opened just barely, just enough to reveal a sliver of awareness. His gaze moved slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as it landed on Duke. His lips moved against the breathing tube, attempting to form a word. "Frank," Sarah leaned closer. "Can you hear me? Blink, if you can understand." Frank blinked once, deliberately. "Duke is here," she told him, her professional demeanor briefly cracking with emotion. "He found you. He followed the ambulance all the way to the hospital." A tear slipped from the corner of Frank's eye, tracking slowly down his weathered cheek. His fingers twitched again, straining to move despite his weakness. Duke responded by carefully shifting position, placing his head directly under Frank's hand so that the man's fingers rested on his fur. The contact seemed to strengthen Frank further, his breathing becoming more regular, his eyes opening wider. Patricia rounded the privacy screen, security guards close behind her. Her reprimand died on her lips as she took in the scene before her, the critically ill patient, now awake and responsive, his hand resting on the dog who had traveled so far to find him. "What is happening here?" she asked, her tone shifting from anger to confusion. Sarah straightened, medical authority evident in her stance. "What's happening, Miss Winters, is that this dog is providing a medical intervention that none of our technology or pharmaceuticals could achieve. In the 10 minutes since Duke arrived, Mr. Holloway has gone from critical decline to consciousness." Patricia stared at the monitors, her administrative objections warring with the evidence before her eyes. "This is highly irregular. With all due respect, Dave interrupted, surprising himself with his own vehemence. Sometimes irregular is exactly what's needed. One of the security guards stepped forward, his expression changing as he got a clearer view of Frank and Duke. "Wait, is that Frank Holloway?" Lisa turned, surprised. "Yes." "Do you know him?" The guard, his name tag read Michael Townsend, moved closer, recognition and shock evident on his face. "Staff Sergeant Frank Holloway, Vietnam, 173rd Airborne Brigade." Frank's eyes shifted toward the voice, a flicker of recognition in their depths. "My father served with you," Michael continued, his voice thick with sudden emotion. "James Townsend. You pulled him from a tunnel after it collapsed, carried him 3 miles to the extraction point." He turned to Patricia. "This man saved my father's life. The only reason I exist is because of what he did." The revelation hung in the air, transforming the sterile hospital room into a space where past and present collided. Patricia's professional mask slipped, revealing the human beneath the administrator. "Mr. Townsend," she said after a long moment, "perhaps you could help us find a solution that addresses both hospital regulations and this unique situation." As they began discussing possibilities, Frank's monitoring equipment suddenly emitted a soft chime and alert, but not an alarm. Sarah checked the readings, a cautious smile spreading across her face. "His intracranial pressure is normalizing," she announced, "and his oxygen levels are improving enough that we might be able to remove the breathing tube soon." Duke, still maintaining contact with Frank, released a soft sound that could only be described as contentment. The shepherd's mission, the one that had driven him beyond normal endurance, was not yet complete. But for the first time since Frank's collapse in the park, the path forward was illuminated with hope. 1 month later, the autumn sun painted Westfield Park in gold and amber tones, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the sycamore tree where Frank Holloway's ordeal had begun. The park looked different now, not because it had changed, but because Frank saw it through the eyes of someone granted an unexpected second chance. He sat on a bench near the playground, his posture still bearing the effects of his stroke. His right side remained partially paralyzed, the arm resting uselessly in his lap. A cane leaned against the bench beside him, a necessary companion for his new reality. At his feet, Duke lay alert but relaxed, his coat gleaming with health in the autumn sunshine, his watchful eyes regularly checking Frank's condition. "Beautiful day, isn't it, Duke?" Frank said, his speech still slightly slurred but dramatically improved from the mumbled, halting attempts of 3 weeks ago. "Reminds me of those fall days in Virginia before I shipped out, or I remember me telling you about that." Duke's ears perked at Frank's voice, his tail sweeping a gentle arc across the ground. The German shepherd now wore a proper service dog vest, complete with patches identifying him as a medical alert animal. The official certification had been expedited through a veterans service organization after Duke's remarkable performance at the hospital. Frank checked his watch, a simple digital model with an oversized face, easier for his stroke-affected vision to read. "Almost time," he noted. "Sarah said she'd meet us here at 1. The mention of Sarah's name caused Duke to lift his head, scanning the park entrance. His ability to recognize names had become part of his regular training routine at the rehabilitation center, where Frank had spent the past 3 weeks relearning basic skills walking, dressing himself, navigating the frustrating new limitations of his body. "There she is," Frank said as Sarah's familiar figure appeared on the path. Duke stood immediately, his posture alert but disciplined, waiting for Frank's command before greeting their visitor. Sarah approached with a warm smile, dressed in casual clothes rather than her hospital scrubs. "Right on time," she called. "How are you feeling today, Frank?" "Better than yesterday. Not as good as tomorrow will be," Frank replied, using the mantra from his physical therapy sessions. With considerable effort, he pushed himself to his feet, leaning heavily on his cane. Duke immediately positioned himself at Frank's left side, providing subtle balance support. "Speech is much clearer," Sarah noted approvingly, her physician's eye automatically assessing his condition. "And you're standing straighter." Frank nodded, pride evident in his weathered face. 20 minutes on the parallel bars this morning. Therapist says I'm progressing faster than expected." "Not surprising. With your dedication," Sarah replied. "And Duke's motivation, of course." She knelt to greet the shepherd, who accepted her attention with dignified pleasure. "Hello, hero. Taking good care of your person?" Duke's serious expression seemed to answer her question without need for translation. "Shall we?" Sarah gestured toward the tree-lined path that wound through the park. Their weekly walks had become a ritual since Frank's discharge from the rehabilitation center, a chance to build stamina, practice mobility skills, and strengthen the unlikely friendship that had formed during those critical days at Riverdale Memorial. They moved slowly, Frank's gait still uneven but steadier than it had been even a week ago. Duke matched his pace perfectly, alert to every subtle shift in Frank's balance or energy. "Lisa called this morning," Frank mentioned as they walked. "Final paperwork came through for the apartment. We move in next Monday." "That's wonderful news," Sarah replied with genuine pleasure. "The one near the VA center," Frank nodded. "First floor. Wheelchair accessible, though. Hopefully I won't need that for long. Small yard for Duke. And rent subsidized through the Veterans Housing Program." He shook his head in wonder. Still can't believe how it all came together. The housing solution had emerged during Frank's second week in the hospital, when Lisa discovered a veterans support organization founded by Michael Townsend, the security guard whose father, Frank, had saved in Vietnam. Once the connection was made, Michael had mobilized resources with remarkable speed, cutting through bureaucratic obstacles that had previously seemed insurmountable. "Have you seen the place yet?" Sarah asked. "Lisa took us yesterday," Frank confirmed. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and safe. First real home Duke and I have had in 2 years. They reached a small pond where ducks glided across the surface, sending ripples through the reflected autumn foliage. Frank eased himself onto a bench, the exertion of the walk evident in his labored breathing. Duke immediately settled at his feet, vigilant despite the peaceful surroundings. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Sarah said after a comfortable silence. "That night in the ICU, when Duke found his way back to you." She hesitated, the scientist in her still struggling with what she had witnessed. "How did you know he was coming?" Frank's weathered face creased in a smile. "Hard to explain to someone who speaks in medical terms all day." "Try me," Sarah encouraged. "I've learned to be more open-minded lately." Frank gazed out over the water, gathering his thoughts. "When you've been alone as long as I have, you forget what connection feels like. Then this stubborn dog comes along." He nudged Duke affectionately with his good foot. "And suddenly there's someone who sees you, really sees you, past all the garbage life's piled on top. He paused, his gaze distant. In that hospital bed, fading in and out, I could feel him searching for me, not just physically, but somehow reaching out. When they took him away, it was like losing a limb I didn't know I had. Sarah nodded, remembering the dramatic changes in Frank's vital signs that no medical textbook could adequately explain. Then that night, when things were getting dark, Frank continued. I felt him coming back, like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog, getting stronger, closer, his voice roughened with emotion. He wouldn't give up on me, so I couldn't give up either. Duke, sensing Frank's emotion, pressed closer to his leg, offering silent comfort. Sarah wiped away an unexpected tear. Science doesn't have good explanations for everything we witnessed, she admitted. But I know what I saw. You two saved each other. Frank nodded, placing his good hand on Duke's head. Still are, every day. They sat in companionable silence, watching the ducks navigate the pond's placid surface. Finally, Frank straightened, ready to continue their walk. Almost forgot, Sarah said, reaching into her bag. Dave asked me to give you this. She handed Frank an envelope. He's sorry he couldn't deliver it himself, but he's on a training course in Phoenix this week. Frank opened the envelope awkwardly with his functioning hand, revealing a gift card to a local pet supply store. A note accompanied it. For Duke's new home, he earned it. Dave. Man spent his whole life afraid of dogs. Frank chuckled, shaking his head in wonder. Now he's sending care packages. Duke has a way of changing minds, Sarah observed with a smile. They completed their circuit of the park at a leisurely pace, Frank pushing himself just enough to build strength without overexertion. As they neared the entrance, a school bus pulled up to the curb and a familiar figure descended the steps. There's our ride, Frank announced as Emma waved from beside the bus. Since becoming involved in Frank and Duke's story, she had volunteered to help with transportation to medical appointments and therapy sessions, her nursing schedule allowing for afternoon availability. Same time next week, Sarah asked, as they prepared to part ways. Frank nodded, extending his good hand to grasp hers. Thank you. Not just for today. I'm the one who should be thanking you, Sarah replied sincerely. You and Duke reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place. As Frank made his way toward Emma and the waiting bus, Duke padding faithfully beside him, Sarah watched the remarkable pair with a sense of privilege for having witnessed their extraordinary journey. The homeless veteran and his loyal shepherd had arrived at her hospital as patients, but had left as teachers offering profound lessons about connection, persistence, and the healing power of unconditional love. In the bright autumn sunshine, Frank Holloway walked slowly but purposefully toward his future, Duke matching his pace step for step. Their path forward would not be easy. Frank's recovery would be lifelong, and the challenges of rebuilding from nothing remained daunting. But they would face each obstacle together, their bond forged in crisis and strengthened through survival. You know what, Duke, Frank said softly as they reached Emma and her welcoming smile. Sometimes the only family you got is the one you find along the way. And that's just fine by me. Duke looked up at his person, amber eyes filled with understanding that transcended species. In that moment, as on the day he had chased an ambulance through miles of blistering heat. His message was clear: wherever you go, I will follow. Whatever comes, we face together. And for two battle-scarred veterans who had found salvation in each other, that promise was everything. When Duke collapsed after chasing that ambulance for 15 kilometers, his bloodied paws and heaving sides told only part of the story. The real miracle was the bond between a forgotten Vietnam veteran and the dog who refused to let him go. This isn't just about animal loyalty, it's about the recognition we all hunger for as we age. The fear of being left behind, abandoned when we're no longer useful. Frank Holloway served his country, built a business, cared for his family until there was nothing left, a journey many of us understand too well. We've watched our safety nets fray, our contributions fade from memory. But Duke saw Frank's true worth when the world looked away. Their story reminds us that connection transcends words, that devotion doesn't require explanation, and that we're never too old or too broken to be someone's entire world, like Frank. Many of us wonder if we still matter. Duke's answer was clear. You are worth chasing through fire and pain. You are worth finding. You are worth saving. In a world that often rushes past its elders, sometimes the purest recognition of our value comes from the silent companion who simply refuses to let us journey alone.